Good evening and welcome to this edition of DeFacto Review, a weekly roundup of the biggest stories shaping Mongolia. Here with us tonight is our commentator, economist Jargat of DeFacto.
Good evening.
And my name is Dutgong. We're live on Facebook at V Television, and we want to hear your thoughts, so send us your comments on Twitter with hashtag Jargat_DeFacto. Coming up on the program, the 8th annual Coal Mongolia Conference was held this past Tuesday and Wednesday. The 16th Discover Mongolia Forum was held this past week. President Patotok sent an official letter proposing to transfer the wrestling palace to the state. So moving to our first topic of the night is the Coal Mongolia Conference that just happened this past week in Shangri-La. So this is an international conference of coal trades investment that has been organized since 2011. And so could you elaborate about some of the topics that was discussed during this conference?
Well, this conference is always expected annually, where the people discussed, all stakeholders of the business industry, government, industry, businesses, investors, and people, the local people, all discuss about the issues facing the industry. Mm-hmm. That was the expectation, and as usual, they met the expectations. And this time, the organizer of this event considered the business, the coal businesses, not as necessarily as a mining, but more transportation, a logistic business. Mm-hmm. Because we had not made our railway from Irtnes to border, we have lost about $10 billion during all these years. Mm-hmm. It was very sad statistics they were giving. And also one of the purposes of the Coal Mongolia Conference Forum is to increase competitiveness of Mongolian coal. Mm-hmm. So all this discussion, we had all this were the topics, main topics of the forum. The one feature, different feature was this time it was organized in cooperation with Chinese party, which is namely, for example, Chinese Coal and Transportation and Distribution Union President. And also he is the National Association of Chinese Corporation, Chinese Association Coal, Mr. Yang Xianfeng. He gave an extended speech and talked about what is the challenges that China industry, coal industry faces today, about the structure, how the consumption pattern is changing. Very interesting report he made. Another feature of this year forum was Irdenes Tavantolga has announced to issue IPO, 30% of the shares. And also the Irdenes Tavantolga first, and they have paid all their debts off, which is good news. And the other news was Russia is becoming a big player now in the industry supplying coal to China. Mm-hmm. So today, first number was Mongolia, then number one is Australia, Mongolia. It was Canada, then now Canada is being replaced by China, by Russia.
And were there any constructive discussions about infrastructure that was discussed during this conference?
About infrastructure?
Yes.
Well, what was positive news is definitely they will make the parallel auto road to the border. Mm-hmm. Where now on the current existing one, remember it was 150 kilometers long line. Now it's about much less, 30 or so kilometers. Mm-hmm. Still, this road is very old, 10 years old, and a lot of holes. And in 5-6 places, damage was happening during the flood this summer. So now, finally, parallel road will be made. That road will take investment of $360 million US, which will be based on PPP. And already they know, they have identified or selected the two companies. One is Chinese road construction company, which currently makes the road to new airport, and Mongolian company called Tartan Gorbi. So these two companies will do it. This is the one good news. The other thing was, well, for railway, they still going to make it. No, yet there is no money yet. And the expectation is this from IPO of East Tawantolga, they will make some money on that project. The third one was they are going to also, the government will do, or the East Tawantolga, mostly government mining company, will do new railway from Zumbayang to straight down to Chinese border to go to the Bot, the Chinese call it Baata. This about 360 or so kilometers long railway also will be made. Auto road also will be made. That's what they have announced.
And what do you think the coal industry will go? Like, where do you see the coal industry going within the short term as well as the long term?
Short term, we have to go ahead with the road. We have to extend the port, border port. And now it's going to be alternative through this Hange port. We will have alternative to the current one, which is which has now working on the over capacity. Probably it will give us a chance to export 50 million tons of coal in the near future, which is now currently at level of 30 million. The third one is, we talk about the coking coal, about the 50 million tons of coking coal. For the brown coal, we need to still to go ahead with more power stations to produce electricity to export. And probably when the oil price of it comes up, then they will continue the current kept idle 3 projects on CTL, coal to liquid. So that's what's going to happen, and well, this 30% of Virtnes Tawantolga on the capital market, domestic and international, most likely going to happen, though the difficulty would be about the 30%, all the shares being sold. The issue will be if the next election again, political instability happens, new political power comes, they usually change the CEOs or management of state-owned companies, including Virtnes Tawantolga, which probably will be a big issue if it happens. So that's how I see the future, the industry.
And what do you think the government's priority should be in trying to make this sector like more competitive?
Yeah, certainly it is the issue of political stability, legal environment for business stability. There are issues about taxes. Still, the investors raising, in particular, license transfer. Here, that's to be solved. And the more important issue is this: all the railways to Chinese border is to be on narrow gauge. All railways going to Russia is to be on wider range. The difference is all the 85 centimeters. And in the middle of the territory, in the center of the territory, we can have this transferring services from between different gauges, so that all the logistics service businesses staying in Mongolia. That will be very competitive business, because Russia and China, in between us, they have only Mongolia, and that country is, if we can be served as this logistics hub for different gauges, it will be. I wrote an article called "Mongolia will be the next Panama." So, and the third, I think we are to continue to use completely up to the capacity this 50 million tons washing plant, which is currently in Okhakhodag, in Tawantolga Energy Resource Company. And then after that, we completely use it, and we have to extend their capacity so that we produce more high-valuated coking coal. That's the third. Fourth, I think most importantly, for the competitiveness of our industry, we should not politicize this mineral and this mineral-related businesses. Because they keep changing, because they are, for example, the political party promise was fulfilled by borrowing a loan to Virtnes Tawantolga distribute to the people, for example, many years ago. So that was it was a huge struggle, and the country has been paying it for quite some years. All this money which is taken by business entity which is used for political purpose. So this sort of things is not to happen in order Mongolia to be competitive in the industry.
And following up on, like, right after the coal conference was the Discover Mongolia Forum,
Yes.
whose mission is to promote business-friendly environments within Mongolia's mining sector by creating a platform between all the stakeholders, such as private sector, governments, and civil societies. So what were some highlights from this forum, and what was the message that our government was trying to send to foreign investors that are interested in Mongolia?
Well, actually, this whole for both conferences are in mining business, and a lot of things had to be repeated.
Yeah.
The minister made a speech now more with more minerals, metals covering, and it is the 16th times, or 16th year they are organizing this event, and this event is important because it is not only a meeting between government and the mining companies and the other stakeholders and people, but all foreign stock exchange listed companies that is working in Mongolia are always coming. Through this coming, we create it is a bridge between investors, ordinary investors in the West, America, North America, those teachers, these people are watching what is happening with their pension shares investment in the Mongolian projects. So we always consider that message to the world wider range. So that's why we discussed it, what we have to improve, what is needed. Minister Somiya Bazar, the mining minister, had an opening speech. He had described the industry with the latest statistics, which was following in brief. Mining turned out by the end of 2017, or for last year, is 90% of our export, 74% of industrial products, 22% GDP, and 72% of foreign direct investment. And it says that without mining, you cannot imagine current Mongolia. Its wealth, it is whatever we consume today. And another statistic was that for the first 7 months of this year, 26 million tons of coal exported. Also 76,000 tons of copper concentration, 9 tons of gold, 3,000 tons of molybdenum concentration, and 7.1 million tons of ferrum concentration. And also another good news on that was, again, this 30% of shares of ETT will be issued, and OT project will continue in spite of all current examinations, checkings, and the government is giving guarantee that this process will go on, operation will go as usual. Expectation is power stations, coal power stations will be made in Gobi, and soon in the near future, copper producing plant will be there. Mongolia will continue with petroleum processing, petroleum refinery plant under the loan from India, and there will be 3 roads to alternative border ports. Access by railway or auto road will be happening. And the last point he said was the national wealth funds will be created in Mongolia. But the most striking point was what he said. In order to do all these projects, Mongolia needs now $20 billion investment, additional investment by the year 2030. And 2030 is a year where we have already this sustainable development goal under the whole world conference. We agreed 12 years from now, our per capita GDP will be $17,500. Today it's $3.8 thousand. We talk about 4 times increase of the per capita income. If you go to GDP, today it is in US dollar it's around 10 billion. Though in Mongolian Tugriks it's growing about 5%, but with the inflation, with the currency exchange rate, we stagnate at the level of $10 billion. So in order to have 17.5 thousand per capita, we need $60 billion economy 12 years from now, which is 6 times more than the current one. And I have estimated that by 2030 we will have 3.5 million people, unlike current 3.1 million now. And by in 12 years we will have 3.5 million people. And for giving that amount of money per capita, or estimating, we need to grow every year at 11.6% for whole 12 years, which is a very large jump. And it is very hard to imagine it, first, without mining, second, without foreign investment, that $20 billion Mongolia expected to receive. For that, the above mentioned conditions should be met.
And as I just mentioned earlier, both of these conferences were held within the same week at Shangri-La. So what do you think are some of the advantages as well as disadvantages of having these two conferences?
I think advantage would be if it is combined together, maybe for 3 days or even for 2 days, it will be cheaper and it will be more economic. But however, this year I understand 2 organizers have been trying to coordinate to make it into one event. But the Coal Mongolia was already agreed to organize it with Chinese coal association, coal industry. So I think technically they could not make it this year together, and hopefully next year it will be one event, big mining, one forum in Mongolia.
And another question I have for Discover Mongolia is whether the Erdenes Mongol company will be managing the Erden factory, and what has happened to the issue of the 49% that was discussed previously?
Yes, the Erdenes Mongol had announced, the CEO announced that the Erdenet company, 51%, he said, no, he's a Mongolian part of, it's now a Mongolian part. Will be managed by now Erdenes Mongolia company. Well, good news, bad news. Good news, this company will be big, large, and bad news, now there will be more fight to be ahead of CEO of Erdenes Mongolia, which, I mean, owns so many assets. It's usual political fight in this country, happening in particular after elections. So it may be one risk, but however, once we talk about the Erdenes Mongolia, Erdenet company, we cannot ignore the 49%, which is hanging legally somewhere in between that company, Mongolian company, who bought on the state. Why? Because at the city level, the court decided that the parliament decisions to take away from the 49% from this Erdenes copper company to the state, to the government, was regarded as a wrong by the city court, at the city court level. But at the constitutional court, which is the highest level of the justice in the country, they said it was right. So they were bringing that, they were using state money, etc., etc. But however, whatever is the decisions used to be by court. All right, so this issue keeps staying there in air, and I don't think they can solve it in the near future, because Mongolian so-called business economic groups are so now tight, keeping each other really without any movement, and I think either they both die or they stay together. So I don't think this, unfortunately, issue will stay on the air for quite some time.
And we discussed the competitiveness of the coal market. Do you think the competitiveness of the coal market will increase with the establishment of a mineral or a commodities exchange?
Well, this talk of commodity minerals exchange been talked for quite some time. In 2014, there was a policy, mining policy principles. Our concept of Mongolia was approved by the parliament, and there is a provision about creating that minerals exchange, stock exchange.
Yeah, like minerals exchange or commodities exchange.
Commodity exchange. And well, and they discussed even the law about commodity exchange 2 years ago. But they have not decided to submit to the parliament because now we have currently the agriculture exchange, agriculture commodities exchange. Okay. And this one is not fully working to our expectations. And there is also some provisions to be changed in our security laws. So until that, now these issues are solved, they decided to wait until 2020. So I think this exchange, commodity exchange is staying there till 2020. But you see, exchange, commodity exchange can work in the countries where the infrastructure is well developed. The promised, it's usually we talk about the future securities, right? On the date, in 3 months, you buy this and that quality in that port.
Yeah.
Mongolia cannot even deliver coal on time to the southern border. So, I mean, this is completely different arrangements. So I hope one day when this country will be more rich, more organized, less corrupt, then this will be probably possible. Otherwise, I don't see today it is any kind of feasible, or I don't think it really can work today.
And another topic that was very big last week was the President Batotok sent an official letter to the Prime Minister on Thursday proposing to transfer the wrestling palace to the state. So there have been a number of disputes about the ownership of the wrestling palace. Can you elaborate more on this?
Well, this is a very long story, continuing maybe almost for the last 10 years. Because we have created, I mean, the group of wrestlers, one association have been creating fund, raising fund, and they got money from the state, from the people, from the company, finally made this long-standing, not finished wrestling palace building, finally done. Now it's working, and it's mostly a place where the large show happens, large tournaments happens, in particular wrestling tournaments. You know, wrestling is a big deal in Mongolia. So that palace is being economically, also doing financially very well. Then the next group of wrestlers and other associations are fighting with them that why they should own it, we should own it. They have been fighting, giving all these papers, documents to the court. Several courts were taking place, I think even at 3 levels. So this was the decisions of the court to give to one of the organizations, where the new one who was opposing the previous one who made it, and they have been talking, the stamp issue, legality issue. Usually a lot happens in Mongolia. At the end, finally, when they wanted to implement or enforce the court decisions, there were the physical resistance on the other side. So now the Mongolian wrestlers are not only fighting on the arena, but also at the court rooms. And finally, all this thing happened to come to our president, who happened to be also a wrestler, and our Olympic wrestler used to be. And so he plays an important role. He first keeps in a large space in this wrestling business in Mongolia. Then plays an important role, just as a wrestler even now. Also he was playing an important role as association head, etc. Now as a president, he has to pay attention to that. But the very letter suggesting Prime Minister to transfer this wrestler's palace to the state, that was an interesting one. Because you see, what is the role of the state? The role of state is to protect all types of property, whether it is government one, public one, private one. They need to protect. That's the role of state. If a state want to transfer some property, they can buy it. So yes, they give money to the construction of this palace from the budget, but I hope they did not give the money to buy it, to take it back one day back. That's first. Secondly, we have so many state-owned palaces that are not working properly. They are losing money. And whenever state property loses money, then we pay, all taxpayers pay. Do we want to have another white elephant? No, we don't want. We want this money, tax money, was not for the palace, but it should go to education and medical care. So that's I think the line that people would read. But finally, I think the best decisions here is to make this resting company into public shareholding company, and let this shareholding company make on, depending on the shares, on board. Let the board have contracted this manager, general manager, and let them run. And why the state should come there just because they are fighting too much? Let them fight. So that's I think how I see.
I mean, the current status of the palace is that it's owned by NGOs. So do you think the government can forcefully take this property? Is there any legal regulations surrounding this that will shed some light on how this should be handled?
There are not particular legal environment in that. But what is clear is if this incident happens, if this NGO property is taken by the state, most probably Mongolian government, maybe the current one or next one, may take over back the circus building, former cinemas that we made before, art cinema, for example. Maybe they can take over all these properties, which is nonsense, which is against everything what this democracy and the democratic and free market economy wants. So hopefully it will not happen.
And you mentioned before that like the president's role in this whole entire issue is very interesting considering his previous powers and positions. So do you think it was appropriate for the president to be involved in this or take an action to make this send out to
involvement probably okay, is the rest even, but the transferring this transferring this NGO property to the state is not the president's business. And it should be done by, it's not at all president business, it is to be done by decision of court. And this is a rule of law country, at least must be. So if Prime Minister decides to take it over, it doesn't work, it should not work. Because if we don't protect somebody's property, the whole system will collapse, like which was during socialist time, and it's collapsed.
And I mean, there was a court, just a court case that was like recently made a decision about of like how the president might go ahead with this, like fight against it in court, try and like transfer it. So what do you think about this?
Well, it should happen in between these NGOs who are fighting for this property, and they should go to the next stage of the court system. Not we should participate in it. And the best decision, as I said, to have a public company, shareholding company, let them have shares, and they have normal procedure of how this property is run. In the world, there is already established a system. So let's not create new wheel again. So let's do with whatever the world is succeeding, I think.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for joining us for this evening's DeFacto review. Please join us next week at the same time for another weekly roundup of the biggest stories shaping Mongolia. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.